Hi folks, thanks for joining me here today. My name's Sean, and you can check out my blog at www.westcoasttofareast.com. I'm going to be joined here today by Rob Dyer, who has recently written a book entitled How to Travel in Japan Without Speaking Japanese. Hey Rob, great to see you.
Hi Sean, good to see you too.
This is kind of our first chance to really talk to each other a little bit.
Indeed.
I know you through your blog on therealjapan.com and your recently written book on how to travel in Japan without speaking Japanese. Maybe you could tell me a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me on, Sean. I discovered your blog actually when I was in the mountains somewhere in Japan, so it's good to finally meet you and talk to you. I started The Real Japan in about 2015, and it was in response to a lot of questions that I was getting from friends and family. Initially, it was just a place to start to sort of gather some thoughts, some photos and so on. And then I just it's kind of burgeoned from there. I got interested in Japan sort of as a young child, really. And it was through the classic Godzilla movies, actually. That's what first drew me to Japan.
I can relate to that. Godzilla and I think samurai movies were probably a big big influence for me as well. I've had a chance to look through your book a couple times now, and I think it's really interesting stuff. Once I finally came to Japan, I realized I had built up such a wall, thinking it was some kind of insurmountable thing to accomplish. But once I got here, I realized it was something that almost anybody could do. So I think it's a great topic.
It simply came about because it was just based on one of the blog posts on the website, and it was by far the most popular post. So I just thought, well, hey, this is interesting. And I worked in publishing for many years and have written a lot for magazines and serials. So I had this kind of writing desire, if you like. It's really just responding to people who are coming to Japan largely for the first time. I mean, the thing with most people is that they're keen to come to Japan. It might be distance, it might be the perception of the expense, but certainly the language barrier is or the language issue, should we say, is seen as a barrier. I would just wanted to really say to people, don't worry, it's not a barrier. And here's a few sort of practical examples and some things to kind of reassure you. It's not about being lazy and saying to people don't bother to learn Japanese,
right?
Because I'm fairly well travelled, and one of the things I always like to do is at least I'm a bit old school but I like my little guidebooks, so phrase books rather. So I've got a small library of the Berlitz phrase books.
I was going to say, are you telling people they don't have to learn the language here because?
Yeah, I mean it's because I'm saying to people, by all means learn some basics. That's what I always encourage. I just think, at least it's good manners, if nothing else, to learn some of the basics of the language.
A lot of it is about intent, you don't have to be good at the language, but, I think the effort goes a long way. And that's not just for Japan. I think that goes for almost anywhere.
That's my experience in most countries. And in Japan, when you look at it from the outside for the first time, the combination of the sound of the language, because there's no familiarity, the order, sentence structure is different and so on. And then obviously the kanji, the characters being so different, it can seem quite daunting. But actually when you're in the country, even though a lot of Japanese people won't speak English very well or at all, that they will be very helpful and accommodating. And it's a great country to have such a challenge, if you like.
Absolutely. And so how long have you been spending time in Japan?
I first came to Japan in 2000, and that was a combination. I had my girlfriend at the time was Japanese, who's now my wife, so we had sort of relatives and family out there on her side of the family. But when I went out for the first time in 2000, the company I was working for had connections in Japan, but had never sent any representatives. So I managed to get a couple of days business expenses with them. So that was really good. And it also meant that I flew into Tokyo that first time and spent some time there on business, then transferred to Osaka by Shinkansen. So that was I had it all crammed in, all the best experiences in the first few days of my first trip to Japan. And then interestingly, and this wasn't by design, but it is the nature of me and my type of travel, was I then didn't actually go back to Tokyo for 10 years.
Wow.
So unlike most people.
Love the big city, but I think, it's like the other side of the coin, you enjoy the big city for what it is and enjoy the countryside for what it is. And I've got little kids, so the countryside is a lot of fun for them to go play and get dirty and all that kind of good stuff,
Yeah.
So you touched on one thing that I thought was interesting, because I was going to ask you if you're going to continue updating this, or maybe we'd see some other stuff in the future, because I noticed you had some stuff in there about different apps and different tools and so forth that you can use on your adventures in Japan.
The first thing is it will be updated at least annually, but the reality is it's going to be frequently updated, probably 4 times a year at least. And in fact, the first edition of the book I launched initially just to my subscribers to my website, and gave them a kind of an early view.
And that's at the realjapan.com. That's the primary website that you've launched.
Yeah, it's the realjapan.com, and there's people can just subscribe on there. They can subscribe for free. But part of the subscription is they get access to a resource library, and in there are some guides, smaller ebooks and so on for free. This was something that I wanted to launch as a paid-for product outside of the community, but I wanted them to get access to it first, and frankly to get their feedback on it. And so I did that as an early stage thing, and made it available to them to buy actually very, very cheaply. And that was a good idea, because I got some terrific feedback. And so once I got that feedback, I incorporated those suggestions and ideas and made a number of changes to the book. And then I launched it publicly. So then it went on sort of general sale. And as I say, that was around about August time this year. If you want to find the book, the easiest way to find it is to use a dedicated URL for it on the internet. So it's called howtotravelinjapan.com, and that will take you to the book.
I gotcha. Yeah, one thing I like about the book is it feels like it's a lot about preparation, and just kind of thinking about what are you going to do in advance. Putting a little bit of a roadmap together on what you're about to do, where you're going to go, what you might encounter. I mean, it's just good practice all the way around.
Yeah, that's a very good point, actually, because I guess I referred to my first trip back in 2000, and interestingly, what I discovered was when I went and did those first couple of trips, I was so overawed by Japan. I was just, wide-eyed everywhere I went, whether it was the cities or the countryside, the mountains, or wherever it was. It was all wonderful to me. But when I went out the first couple of times, which was in the consecutive years, it was only when I came back and I thought, this is great, but I'm missing things. Every time I came back, I thought, well, hang on, I was in that town and I didn't see that place. Or, that mountain resort was just half an hour down the road and I just completely forgot to check that. So I realized that what I did was I really wasn't planning properly my trips in advance. Now, that's not something I normally do or had done at that point. So it was kind of a skill set almost that I had to learn and develop. But as soon as I started to do that pre-trip planning, then it all unfolded, and I was seeing so much more and getting kind of more bang for your buck basically, and for your time. So what I wanted to do with the ebook was, it's not a conventional travel guide. As I say, obviously there's tips for language, but you're right, a lot of that is around preparation and preparing for the trip. So in fact, it's actually kind of subtitled as an e-guide and a workbook, because there's a number of exercises in the book for people to do. And this is really, as you say, to kind of get their headspace right first and think about, almost put themselves in the position of, okay, I'm back from the trip. What would I want to reflect on and say, what did I enjoy? What would I tell my friends and family about? And make sure you build those, sort of touch points into your itinerary, and make sure you touch those bases on your trip.